Hello and welcome to this new episode. Within the last episode, we went into the self-archetype and also touched upon the idea regarding, individuation and the mystery schools. And, how a lot of this goes way further back into the prehistory. Now, when it comes to all of this regarding the prehistory, a lot of this also ties into symbolism itself as well, which is the foundation of, where all the later individuation rituals also come from. This interaction between consciousness and the unconscious. And when it comes to symbolism itself, the earliest human deployment of symbols, which may be 100,000 years old, requires re-examination of much we thought we knew. That far back, there is little evidence to go on, but it is clear, on the basis of hard evidence in the form of cave paintings and artifacts like the Venus of Willendorf or the Lion Man, that the use of symbols was demonstrably underway between 60,000 and 40,000 years ago at multiple sites. And one of the most striking pieces of evidence comes from cave paintings. These remarkable artworks found in various parts of the world, which provide a glimpse into the symbolic thinking of early humans. The most famous example include the Nassau and Altamira caves in Europe, as well as numerous sites in Africa, Asia, and the Americas. And these paintings typically depict animals, human figures, and abstract symbols, suggesting that these early humans possessed the capacity for symbolic representation. And I will, within a later section on cave rituals, go deeper into the ritualistic aspects of the cave paintings themselves. But next to such cave paintings, also artifacts like the Venus of Willendorf, small carved female figurines dating back around 30,000 years, who are known as Venus figurines, also played an important symbolic role in early human cultures. These figurines, found across Europe and other regions, emphasize the female form with exaggerated features. Their purpose likely held symbolic significance, probably connected to fertility. Where the Lion Man, a small ivory figurine discovered in Germany, is around 40,000 years old, and it represents a half-human, half-lion figure and is one of the oldest known examples of figurative art. And this artifact underscores the ability of early humans to create symbolic representations that combine aspects of animals and humans. In that sense, early human societies were not simply driven by survival instincts, but also exhibited cultural and symbolic behaviors. The use of symbols played several essential roles within their cultures. Symbols, for instance, served as a means of communication, allowing early humans to convey complex ideas, stories, and shared experiences. Cave paintings, for instance, might have communicated hunting strategies and mythologies next to their ritualistic aspects, and these ritualistic aspects and linked cave rituals forming the basis for the later Koryos and Archetypes traditions, but also are connected to later sites such as Göbekli Tepe, as they represent the earlier form of spirituality. Ancestor worship also being a part of this early form of spirituality itself, next to hunting rituals. Next to this, many prehistoric artifacts and cave paintings are associated with spiritual beliefs and rituals, and these symbols represented deities, ancestors, or supernatural forces. Rituals and ceremonies were thus significant aspects of early societies, and symbols played a central role in these practices. Symbols were then also used to establish group identity and cohesion, especially through animal totems. And these shared symbols, in that sense, helped create a sense of belonging among individuals in a community or tribe. And these symbols may have denoted membership in a particular group and marked territory. And the emergence of symbolism in prehistory is also most importantly closely tied to the cognitive development of early humans. The ability to create and interpret symbols reflects advanced cognitive functions, including abstract thinking and pattern recognition. As creating symbols requires the ability to represent concepts, ideas, or entities that are not directly present in the physical world. And this cognitive leap indicates a high level of intellectual development within early humans, where they also showed next a remarkable ability to recognize patterns in their environment. And this skill was essential for creating meaningful symbols and interpreting their significance, where also the development of symbolic communication was likely linked to the increasing complexity of early human societies, later forming language as well. Symbols then really facilitated cooperation, coordination, and shared understanding within larger groups, which also again links to animal totems, a spiritual cosmology, and other linked rituals, which I will go deeper into within the next chapter on our Neolithic base, which I'm gonna go into in this particular video as well. And this initial exploration of symbolism in prehistory is not an isolated topic, but sets a stage for understanding the evolution of human culture and civilization, which we're going to go into in this series. And in the forthcoming sections within the Neolithic base chapter, we will observe how the seeds of symbolism planted in prehistoric times continued to flourish as human societies became more complex. The development of symbolic communication and its roles in early human society provided the foundation for the rituals, traditions, and belief systems that became integral to the Neolithic era. Where in the next section we will go into animistic hunting rituals, cave rituals, Göbekli Tepe, ancestor worship, the Mother of the Mountain, and the Proto-Indo-Europeans with their linked warrior tradition. The latter emerging out of earlier hunting rituals and rites of passage rituals, which in their later form still contain some of their earlier symbolism. The purpose of which is to try to paint a picture of the more archaic forms of these archetypal figures that are linked to these initiation and warrior initiation rituals, thus trying to reconnect us to these earlier layers of humanity and with it the deeper layers of the psyche, so we can not just read about it, but in the end learn from them and reintegrate them into our life. Now, when it comes to this, a lot of this touches also upon animism, and animism forms the basis of human spiritual practices and is the belief that objects, places, and creatures all possess a distinct spiritual essence. Animism in that sense sees all animals, plants, rocks, rivers, the weather systems, and many other phenomena as animated and alive. This is also an important factor to consider when going deeper into the Neolithic base of humanity, as these animistic beliefs both connect to their beliefs regarding hunting, rituals, nature, ancestors, and various spirits, including spirits of nature, tree spirits and other vegetation spirits, but also spirits of place and water spirits playing an important role. The tree spirits within an animistic context are tied to specific trees and are seen as interconnected to these trees. In that sense, they also inhabit said tree, often being seen as orbs that can manifest around the trees or vegetation. Spirits of place themselves are linked to these specific things such as rivers, sacred groves, mountains, caves, and other natural features of the landscape. Water spirits often linked to rivers, but also lakes, also being seen as such a spirit of place. They would then also hold specific rituals at rivers, mountains, and lakes to honor the spirit of place, often making offerings of food, libations of drinks, often alcoholic, but also seeds, nuts, and fruits were offered to the spirits as well. A good example is the ancient Roman goddess Veronia, who had still in ancient Roman times such rituals, where the participants would play music, hold a dance, and leave offerings at the altar in the sacred grove dedicated to the goddess. A ritual they would only do once a year, after which humans were not to set foot within the sacred grove. Where the shamans of Mongolia, for instance, to this day make offerings and libations to the spirits of place connected to various mountains called Savdak within Mongolia. And when it comes to this connection to nature, deities, and the spirits of nature, including the various archetypal energies they work with, this, connects from a Jungian lens to the collective unconscious. The Neolithic and animistic form of these archetypal energies forming an important foundation to understand the later forms of these archetypes. In that way, understanding the Neolithic base helps us to understand the foundational essence of the archetype. Then, tracing this through time and within different cultures, we can better understand this energy beyond the constraints of time and space. Next to this, how further we trace it back in time, how closer we get to the hunter-gatherer root of it all, and with it to the deepest layers of the psyche, which includes our most primal aspects. In a modern sense, we have become a long way removed from this Neolithic base regarding our relationship to these archetypal energies. Generally, there having been a trend that moves these archetypes from more instinctual and primal figures more and more towards archetypal figures such as Zeus, Apollo, Mars, Athena, and other such figures that become more and more associated with more intellectual or general cerebral forms. And this trend is especially visible beyond classic antiquity, such as in the late antiquity, culminating now into the situation that we are in. Though even if partly this movement towards the side of consciousness is not a bad thing, when however the archetypes become disconnected from their more primal and instinctual foundations, well, we start to also not only lose touch with nature and the natural world, but also with our own primal and instinctual nature. However, as we explore the Neolithic base, it's also crucial to recognize, the role of animism as well, like I said. Because these animistic beliefs weren't just spiritual concepts, they intricately influenced rituals, hunting practices, later warrior initiation rites, and the deep connection our ancestors had with the natural world. Now, contrasting sharply with the nature worship of the Neolithic era, Christian aversion from the world marked a profound shift. As Carl Jung wrote in Symbols of Transformation, through centuries of educational training, Christianity subdued the animal instincts of antiquity and of the ensuing ages of barbarism to the point where a large amount of instinctual energy could be set free for the building of civilization. The effect of this training showed itself to begin with in a fundamental change of attitude, namely in the alienation from reality, the otherworldliness of the early Christian centuries. And it was an age that strove after inwardness and spiritual abstraction. Nature was abhorrent to man, but it was not only the aesthetic beauty of the world that distracted their senses and lured them away from concentrating on a spiritual and supramundane goal. There were also demonic or magical influences emanating from nature herself. This alienation from nature impacted not only aesthetics, but also deepened the disconnect from our primal and instinctual nature, a gap we, as modern individuals, are tasked with bridging. In that sense, where this leaves us as modern individuals is the imperative to reintegrate these primal and instinctual foundations connected to ancient archetypes. And this integration is essential for finding a balance between consciousness and the connected intellect and rationality, and the unconscious and the associated primal and instinctual energies. The anima, or animus, being integral to this process, plays a crucial role as our emotions serve as a vital bridge between consciousness and the unconscious. Failing to reintegrate both aspects into a coherent whole relegates these primal foundations and energies associated with archetypes to the collective shadow, a part of the grander collective unconscious. Then it's crucial to know that archetypes and ancient ancestral patterns still wield influence within the collective unconscious, and this enduring impact is evident not only in the persistent nature of the archetypes explored in this book across ages and cultures, but also in modern expressions and fascinations that captivate people as well. We are still held unconsciously in the grasp of these archetypes, primarily residing within the collective shadow. And as we delve into the archetypal patterns of the sovereignty goddess, Wotan, and Dionysus within the context of this book, our aim is to bring these archetypal energies back into consciousness, lifting them from the depths of the collective shadow. Building on our Neolithic exploration, we now first will draw parallels between ancient archetypes and modern phenomena, before going deeper into the Neolithic and later archetypal manifestations of Wotan, the Koryos, and the sovereignty goddess. A good manifestation to highlight is the Mistress of the Beasts archetype, whose influence echoes the Neolithic reverence for nature, and rituals dedicated to the spirits of place, later becoming the sovereignty goddess. And from a Jungian perspective, environmental activism can be seen not only as connected to the Earth Mother or Great Mother, but also to a figure from the very early Neolithic times, such as the Mistress of the Beasts, often manifested in forms like Artemis. Additionally, Holda, later transformed into the witch riding the broom, the distaff, due to Christian influences, represents a similar archetype, being often distorted into a negative witch figure. Environmental activism in this context becomes a contemporary expression of the archetypal energy linked to the Mistress of the Beasts, with activists embodying the fierce protection and nurturing aspects associated with this archetype. Where environmental crises like climate change and biodiversity loss can be seen as wake-up calls that stir the archetypal energies related to the Mistress of the Beasts. And if these archetypes remain largely unconscious, their manifestation can lead not only to distorted cultural expressions but also to destructive behaviors. And the continuation of our disconnect with nature and the continued exploitation of it, the current imbalance between the human society and the society of nature, once integrated and balanced in the ancient past, might manifest currently in destructive ways in this unintegrated form, resulting in self-destructive behaviors and potential conflicts within society. This can thus manifest itself as the withholding and life-taking aspect of this figure that drives the movement unconsciously, instead of the truly balanced form where there would be a relationship between humanity and nature. The positive aspect that the Mistress of the Beast brings forward can be seen in the environmentalist focus on balance and sustainability. In the more negative sense, it can shift to an unconscious focus on retribution for the damage done to the environment at the cost of true balance that the archetype represents. Where it can become an unconscious drive for humanity to have to pay in ways that go beyond finding a true balance with nature, but instead a sort of Damocles hanging above humanity in the form of divine punishment and wrath without there being a way for humans to live in true harmony with nature. This can then also drive these movements away from solving the real issues within society and within the ecosystem and restore the balance of the biosphere, where instead threading the winepress of punishment could distort this into a destructive force instead. And as the sovereignty goddess archetype, she's also deeply intertwined with themes of femininity and empowerment. In this context, feminism aligns with the themes of this archetype through the pursuit of women's rights, gender equality, and the empowerment of women in various aspects of life, including social, political, and economic spheres. And the sovereignty goddess is also linked to compassion and justice, advocating for marginalized people. Something we will go into much deeper in the section regarding the sovereignty goddess, highlighting her role beyond the domain of nature. Where another important archetype would be Wotan, who is associated with warrior energy and collective identity. And this archetype is explored more in the Koryos section of this book. The Koryos section itself goes deeper into the intricate layers of various cultural expression of the Koryos pattern, which Wotan and the Wild Hunt is one example of. The Koryos pattern itself is based on the reconstructive Proto-Indo-European warrior tradition that is echoed in later Indo-European warrior and initiation traditions. Coming now back to the figure of Wotan itself, Jung and Heidegger were aware of the emergence of the figure of Wotan in the zeitgeist of the German people before World War II. Unfortunately, due to the lack of a cultural lightning rod to hold that energy and the distortion of the pattern itself by the Nazis, it emerged in its destructive shadow form, influencing many people and leading to destructive actions by groups and societies. And it's crucial to understand that this does not absolve people from their actions. However, bringing these archetypal energies into consciousness is possible, allowing the transformation of such archetypes into more integrated and healthy forms. And whether this transformation occurs is entirely up to the individual and society as a whole. The archetype of Wotan, with its association with warrior energy and collective identity, can also be observed in the rise of nationalist and populist movements. These movements often tap into the collective unconscious, stirring feelings of identity, strength, and a shared purpose. In its distorted form, this archetype can fuel extremist ideologies, leading to ethnocentrism, xenophobia, and aggressive nationalism. And unconscious identification with the destructive shadow of Wotan may result in destructive actions by groups or societies. Moreover, the archetype of Wotan can be identified in cultural resurgences that romanticize and idealize a nation's past, leading to a selective view of history, emphasizing warrior virtues and a particular cultural identity. This can be observed in political movements that promise a return to a perceived golden age or advocate for a particular vision of the future. And in its darker manifestations, such movements may seek to impose their ideology forcefully, suppressing dissent and justifying harmful actions in the name of a higher collective purpose. The warrior aspect of Wotan is also evident in cultures that glorify military strength and valor. And military traditions and symbols can become a vessel for the archetypal energy associated with Wotan. And in its distorted form, this can lead to militarism, aggressive foreign policies, and the glorification of war. The unchecked influence of the shadow aspects of Wotan may also result in destructive conflicts and power struggles. Where a final example has to do with Dionysus, a figure often oversimplified in popular culture as the god of wine, drinking, and parties. And this reduction of Dionysus is evident in historical contexts as well, such as the devolution of ecstatic rites into orgies before the fall of the Roman Empire. In a modern context, the influence of the unintegrated party Dionysus is seen in the pursuit of pleasure and the numbing of consciousness through substances or technology. In its distorted form, this archetype may manifest in a party culture that indulges in excess and escapism. So the pursuit of pleasure and the numbing of consciousness through substances or technology can thus reflect an unintegrated Dionysian energy, where the constant engagement with digital platforms, social media, and virtual experiences can be seen as a modern expression of the Dionysian urge for liberation and ecstasy. However, in its unintegrated form, this can lead to addictive behaviors, contributing to a disconnection from reality. Dionysus associated with immediate pleasure and gratification can also be connected to consumer culture that emphasizes instant satisfaction. And this pursuit of material pleasures contrasts with the original form of Dionysus, which was associated with transformative and ecstatic rites. In modern times, the loss of such meaningful rituals represents an unintegrated aspect of the Dionysian archetype. The emphasis on spiritual transformation and inner exploration within the Orphic tradition, aligns more with the hippie and New Age focus on spiritual journeys, self-discovery, and seeking higher states of consciousness through various practices, including meditation and psychedelics. Where the communal aspects of Dionysian festivals find echoes in the hippie movement's embrace of communal living, shared resources, and a countercultural rejection of mainstream societal norms. Both express a desire for a more communal, inclusive way of life. And the loss of these rituals contributes to the distortion of the Dionysian archetype in contemporary society. Thus, without a conscious effort to reintegrate the Dionysian energy through meaningful rituals, people, are left seeking liberation through superficial means. And the absence of these rituals perpetuates a cycle of shallow pursuits, contributing to a disconnection from reality. And it is within the conscious revival of these ancient rituals that the potential for a more profound and spiritual fulfilling Dionysian experience lies. And by recognizing the historical significance of these rituals and their impact on the archetype, people can navigate the modern manifestation of Dionysus with a deeper understanding and purpose. So in essence, the loss of meaningful rituals are not merely a historical footnote, but a crucial factor in the transformation of the Dionysian archetype into its contemporary, often distorted form. The pursuit of pleasure in today's society is deeply linked to the absence of the transformative and ecstatic rites that once defined the essence of Dionysus, which in their deepest sense were originally linked to individuation rites. And it is through a conscious reintegration of these rituals that we can break free from the cycle of shallow indulgence and reclaim the deeper spiritual dimensions inherent in the archetype. So by delving into the historical backgrounds of these archetypal figures that we mentioned, ranging from late antiquity, with examples like the Mithraic mysteries of the 4th century AD, to ancient traditions such as the Orphic mysteries dating back to the 6th century BC, this book aims to trace the evolution of these symbols through time, so this video series. And the exploration thus aims to go back to the Neolithic era and the origins of these archetypes, uncovering thus the primal roots that have shaped their significance in human consciousness. Where I do want to add, even though these movements within Western society are born out of the real world, social, cultural, and historical situations that shape them, on a deeper archetypal level, they touch upon these very same archetypal patterns that were part of the psyche of the Indo-European people, which are now in the collective shadow. There having been a continual struggle between these patterns that have been pushed into the collective shadow as taboo and to be avoided, and the collective consciousness of society as a whole, so the dominant cultural framework of the time that had tried to repress these archetypal patterns. However, when it comes to archetypes, it is when we repress them that they can emerge in their unintegrated shadow form, which can lead to destructive outcomes. The ultimate goal with this book then is also not only to educate readers and viewers about these figures, but to initiate a revival of their ancient rituals. So through the Jungian lens which is used within this book and the series, this process thus seeks to elevate these archetypal energies from the depths of the collective shadow, fostering a conscious reintegration and a renewed relationship with these potent forces in the contemporary psyche. And the term collective shadow in that sense carries the weight of the accumulated human experiences, both light and dark, that have been relegated to the realms of the unconscious throughout the centuries. As such, we have to see through the contemporary and more recent historical distortions and connect these archetypal patterns back to their Neolithic archetypal pattern and context, if we are to integrate that shadow and move away from those destructive outcomes and lead all of this into a force of renewal instead.